Hello, everybody. Welcome to Free Thinkers Podcast. This is episode 24 of the series. And the theme is information is physical and how all ethics comply with this law. We'll look at a number of topics, one being the role of information in the new laws in physics of information theory. Secondly, how ethical thinking gives a probability of order or well-being. And lastly, the false information of the green agenda. So today I'm delighted to be speaking to Aaron van Kampen, and I first interviewed Aaron just over a year ago, and he was actually my first podcast interviewee on Free Thinkers Hub. So just to reacquaint you to him, he's author of Blood Phone, The Dutch Childless Congo's Children, and a number of other publications, including a new book just being released called The Brussels Lobby. As a businessman, entrepreneur, he has worked all over the world in the oil and gas operations on all operational levels, including CEO level. And he created the think tank and research institute on sustainable systems design called Sustenance for All, which focuses on information theory, systems sciences, and cybernetics. He created the Realitites theory based on the universal obligation to live in reality, which is limited by the laws of physics and nature. He says that scientifically, he can show us that the root cause of all global strife and chaos, disorder or entropy is political and financial control by enforcement and censoring of information. He cites bioweapon development, ecological destruction, biodiversity loss, hungry people eating bats and other wild animals, coronavirus lockdowns, more deaths, distrust, dehumanization, and so on. In our last conversation, he said that the future is more uncertain than ever and more people are in despair. I've invited Aaron back for an update on all of this and to hear about his latest research. So welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Amina, for having me for a second time. It was a long introduction. That's okay. Just one thing I would like to explain. So you say realimitate. It actually is a Dutch word. It's reality and limiteit. So realimitate, like apartheid. It should be pronounced like this. And actually it means the limitations of reality. So we have to function within limitation that reality allows us, right? So this is very logical. You can't cross the street by only looking to the left and then don't look to the right. It's impossible.
Well, thank you for that preface, and that's going to really put into perspective the conversation we're just about to have. So many people think of information as just hard data that's perhaps in your computers, but we're talking about information at another level, certainly with the combination of physics, sociology, and biology and how life began. So my first question to you is, can we think of information as a driving force for life?
Yes, we certainly can. There's of course, an idea of an information is just a message or something you hear or see. But information, according to science and also biology and now even sociology, as you say, is a real thing. It's a substance even. It's a thing that we have to consider. There is a relationship between information, mass or matter, and energy. So the research that we are doing now is to find out if what we can do with information, and then we find in nature that information is the basic ingredient, really, for communication, and only through communication a system can evolve and learn. So everything that is alive, living system in nature, need information as their energy to evolve and create novelty, as we call it. Now, information is then, of course, not understood as a thing, it's just a message. Then we try to, or tend to, disregard it as irrelevant. But this is, according to laws of physics, not possible.
Okay, so We're going to talk about some of that research, but before we go into it, because I know that there is some leading edge research in terms of what information is and how we can measure it to some extent. But you say that the probability or the probabilistic nature of information perception is that it shapes our reality. And you talked about it being energy. So can you talk more about that in terms of the information, energy, matter equivalence, which may be called the Trinity, can't it?
Yeah.
That's another way of seeing it.
Yes. Well, as in science, the final word is never said that it is fixed and forever the same. We have to talk about probability. And the idea of this probability, and I, designed or created the three P's, the PPP, performance, probability, pattern. That idea we can apply, and then we can use information as the energy to increase performance of man-made systems. So the probability of performance depends on the quality and quantity of information. And then we apply the equivalence principle of information, mass, and energy, meaning that information is then the energy to improve performance of matter, of everything we build.
Okay, so you're seeing it in terms of performance related, and I kind of have a direct experience recently, and it's probably more relates to remote viewing. And so I spoke with somebody who wouldn't call themselves a remote viewer, but certainly they can go into the field and read information. And so they gave me some possible or probable timelines. And it's to do with some, selling house, basically. So it's like, here's the timelines. These are the figures, these are the numbers of people who could be interested in buying the property. So it's all about potentials. So information's out there in the field as a set of potentials, isn't it? So, is that something that you kind of see as, people can read this information through a sense of knowingness rather than hard scientific kind of measurement?
Yes, there's of course two sides of it. Now I just talk a bit about physics, but of course it's also very logic and also in social systems applicable as potentiality. So the probability of performance improvement is then in the field, as you say, related to the potentiality of our creativity, for example. So what we build, we can improve much better or make it better by the use of information, by all of relevant information we can find. So this relates to the questioning of, what can you build? For example, I can just say, okay, how can we build a rocket to the moon, right? All relevant information needs to be used and applied in order to reach the moon, right? And this is for everything we do. But as you observe in the world, information is sometimes disregarded or not, as says non-relevant, or we are not even allowed to use it. So this makes the man-made systems, if it's a rocket or a society, same, yeah? Either orderly, in order, certain, maximally certain, or disorderly, or minimum certainty. So the certainty principle of creation depends on the quality of information and the quantity of information we use, not as a fixed moment, but we keep using, to operate that system too for the long term.
Okay, so there's an element of, in order to have stability, there has to be a higher level of certainty.
Exactly. So that stability, good that you mentioned it. Stability is what also nature seeks. Natural systems, living systems, your body, my body, nature, even society as a natural system seeks stability. And that stability is often undermined because of an information deficit, an information lack. We're not allowed to correct, for example, a society by new information because there is interest preventing that.
Okay, so this is like a really interesting subject. I just have to turn something off. I'm really sorry, Aaron. I don't want to
Just pause it
break
for a
things.
moment. You can pause it and cut it out. Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah.
Okay,
ahead,
so we kind of just talked about how stability operates in nature and about, how it determines the functionality and performance of things. So in terms of like it having good performance, then there needs to be no censorship of the information, no restriction of the information that comes into the field. So let's just go on to talk about the work of Dr. Melvin Vopson, who's a University of Portsmouth physicist. And he's designed an experiment, and you're talking about having found the fifth element, okay, through this experiment. Now, I'm not sure if I'm talking cross purposes, whether that fifth element used to be called ether or not, but please explain.
Yes, well, he issued a paper in 2021 and 2019, I believe, about that the fifth element of matter. We have plasma, liquid, gas, and matter. Four. The fifth one could be information. If he is right and he's experimenting with that and designing new theory and test methods, then it would alter the idea of that, and that nature only works with matter and energy, and not with information. So the information would then be more fundamental than the matter and energy, or at least build a equivalence. So the equivalence principle is that information, mass, and energy are interrelated, interdependent, and they actually form the basis for life, for living systems. So information is therefore becomes a tangible substance next to liquid, gas, plasma, or matter. So this would be a significant paradigm change to see the world in a different manner, a different way. And then the relationships, the work that I'm doing on the applications of information in society and social systems, that would create the bridge between the physics and society, because then we can say, hey, we have a piece of information, a real piece, a stick, and then we have to use that as a substance to change, for example, towards that goal of evolution, goal of survival, goal of order.
Well, interestingly, I heard that science used to be much more open-minded, certainly pre-Einstein, at the time when people were kind of dismantling Newtonian physics and getting into quantum physics. At that early stage of exploration, everything was on the table, nothing was off the table. And it seems that with the work that you're doing and the work that you're talking about, Dr. Melvin Vopson, that it's kind of putting things back on the table again, isn't it? To kind of explore rather than eliminating those potentialities.
Yes, exactly. It does, what this new idea of new science could be is that it includes everything. It does not exclude. And Newtonian physics excludes the new way of thinking. This is a problem. So when we have, again, based upon all the information, we can only decide what is real. Not only on Newtonian physics, okay, we limit ourselves to matter and energy and the billiard principle, causality. But now we have to deal with complexity in which we cannot measure the causality anymore. We have to use the information to steer the complexity with. This is a different way of seeing things, which is very important.
So, I kind of wonder because, you're aware of kind of my kind of questioning and of life, and that it does involve a spiritual aspect. So, this whole thing of knowingness rather than scientific proof. So it's like, so for example, field interaction being the new science and how we can translate information into a physical form. and how we might use our consciousness at all places at all times. Yeah. So is there more you can kind of say? Because I know that you have had a near-death experience, which we talked about in the last podcast. And on more than one occasion, you've had your life saved. So, in relation to biology and consciousness, just moving away from measurement and that empirical science kind of side, how would you kind of bring to life information in relation to consciousness, spirituality, science, those kind of things?
Yeah, it was not a coincidence, but this weekend, just now, we were with Joe Dispenza in Basel, in Switzerland. Now, what he says, and you maybe know of his work, is that, of course, again, the consciousness, the meditative consciousness is the realm of creativity and healing. So he, of course, connects the information with the energy, because also he understands that the information we collect by our senses, by our total senses, not just by empirical sciences, but also with our consciousness and subconsciousness, is the form to move matter, move reality towards healing, towards becoming better, to also to conserve energy that we normally lose by, for example, our pasts, our reflection of the past, and our hope for the future.
There.
Right? Yes. So what I found, and I made all the notes this weekend, that the work I'm doing and work Melvin's doing and others are doing is actually related to his perception of how to perform better. The same thing. Performance probability is higher when you use your consciousness.
Yeah, so it's about directive will, isn't it? And and I guess in a sense that the more vibration or energy is raised, then the more the conscious intent will be of a lower entropy in your terms.
Yes.
And a good force.
Yeah, so it's like the evolution and the novelty of creativity based upon the quantum, physics that we had talked about, like the unified field we have, everything is unified in the lower and subatomic world, as anything is a wave, like a wave of energy, really. But it's also because, as Melvin says, all the energy, the particles, the electrons have information, they carry information about themselves as well. So they contain information. So the information energy relationship is herewith confirmed. And Joe Dispenza says that information is maybe the blood, the blood for life.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because ultimately blood and plasma is also 99% of the universe. So there are no coincidences here, are there, in terms of...
No, it's just like a full circle to be aware, to become aware that our ability to sense and to feel and to know, etc., everything comes in as information into us, in people. It is information that we see, observe, feel, whatever. It's information. William Blake said that if the windows of perception were cleansed, all we would see is infinite. Everything would be infinite. And what he says is limitless. So the limitless potentiality of this combination of the fields, the physics, the logic, the sociology, and so on, is now becoming one realm of energy or information, as you will, to create order. And the word for information is negentropy, meaning negative entropy, meaning order. Can't make it any more beautiful.
Okay, so I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated with this field, as you know, and it's also about, it's almost like the lag between science and spirituality. And I know that bringing those two things together is kind of the new science, because very, I'm sure that, well, most of the kind of more famous scientists have always kind of like acknowledged that there's more to than just man himself or herself, but there's definitely the spiritual dimension, or the kind of intelligent by design kind of notion that everything's so perfectly kind of made, that there just has to be a bigger force at play. So just staying with ethics, because I know that this is something that's really, kind of prominent in your work. So, you talked about probability of order and well-being, and how that needs to have good information in the field for that to work. So tell us more about your new book, and judging from its title, I suspect it is focused on ethics in business and politics. Do you want to talk more to what you're writing about now?
Yeah, you're talking about this idea of blood phone, which I called in the Dutch version. It's called Congo's Children. It's about the African exploitation of minerals by big business at the cost of like negative interdependent, meaning we take it out, for example, to create electrical cars, to design computer systems, but we need the minerals, the rarer minerals to do so. And rather than make a deal with those countries, we try to exploit them, and then abuse or destroy life to get it. And this is, of course, unethical and not sustainable. And about these topics, I write these so-called eco thrillers to not maybe scientifically make my point, but create a story through storytelling. The storytelling about normal people in this situation, what they are doing, how can they create solutions, and how would they fight for justice and ethics, and that there will be non-harmful functionality, as I call it. So we can create these non-harmful living systems, commerce, trade, by allowing everybody who is in the chain of trade to benefit, not just take it out at the cost of murder, rape, as what happens in Congo. So I also refer to the work of Denis Mukwege. He was the Nobel Prize winner for peace because he treats the raped women in Congo. So that kind of relationship. So the political cause, first of all, explored in the book, and now the consequences that we are dealing with today.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about those issues, because certainly I think I was reading that the latest figures show that there are more than 3 million sales, and growing close to 75% a year of electric vehicles in the world. And you're talking about rare minerals specifically. We're talking about the 125,000 tons of cobalt that's being mined globally each year, to contribute to that. So just in terms of that, I'm kind of, is there another stage to this? Because you're talking about how that can all be done ethically. But, is there a way that, we can take the resources of the earth at that kind of scale and keep that within the kind of limits of physics and reality and good information? Or is there a different kind of social business model that needs to be applied?
Yeah, I think both. When a entrepreneur or a businessman or a government insists of having a unlimited supply of weapon grade minerals, for example, they do not want to rely on politics too much, so they are going to enforce that supply is guaranteed. So the enforcement should be taken out. A trader principle is that, okay, we do a trade and both will benefit, either by price or by circumstance. When I do business, I cannot enforce my demand for that business upon the supplier. I can't. But in politics, it is organized like that by abusing or using corruption. And if we stop the corruption, perhaps then we can say, all right, now we have a level playing field to do the trade. No, it's so much it's valued. You see what happens. So think about it. A few months ago, then in the French-speaking Africa, those revolts and the pricing of some minerals that they were supplying to the nuclear, at nuclear power stations in France were kept so low, in order for France to buy them for a very little price. And now with the new president in there, they say, okay, we're going to now charge you the normal price for it, which was 100 times more. So you see, the manipulation of pricing by enforcement, by force, is of course destabilizing again. Again, the stability is not guaranteed. And that information about that is of course suppressed by the press.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly didn't know about that specifically, about that, that's happened recently. So it's interesting how all the state politics power, all the corporations really do conspire to keep information out of the field so people don't know about the realities.
So again, the first cause principle is again the information suppression. And when you are buying an electrical vehicle or you buy a computer, the true cost price, and including the externalities, for example, abuse of people, immigration forces, whatever, is not included in the final cost price, is it?
So I mean, we're talking at a very material level, and I guess in the world of new physics or science spirituality, it's the kind of non-material level. It's the level we can't kind of quantify as matter. So what's your thoughts about information being manipulated for good? Because we know that information is manipulated for the bad. So for example, if we take out information out of the field, if that's possible, that has a history of corruption, a history of negativity, then that information is no longer, circulating to be recirculated by people picking that from the field. Does that make sense? So is there a way that we can purify and clean information?
Yeah, well, the issue is that people don't really look for all the information often because there is a ulterior motivation not to do so. I say information is limited because we think we have interests to protect that would not be valuable to those people who suppress the information any longer, you see.
Well, I was just kind of wondering with the kind of work that Vopson's doing, of being able to capture and measure it. Whether that can be done, because we've lived in like a millennia of information being manipulated for the bad, as we know. So it's just like whether there's a way to reverse that.
Okay. I think I understand now. I think that the relationship, information, energy, matter cannot be broken. That is what we try to do. So that rule, that physical law, hopefully is now becoming accepted. And then politicians or everybody who wants to subtract or suppress that information knows that already when you do that, you are going into this realm of uncertainty and entropy disorder. So the study I'm doing, the first line I wrote was information deficit is equal to disorder. That can be proven now, I think so. So I'm working on that to prove that for my PhD final. So when politicians, for example, and businesses would accept that rule as an inescapable law, then maybe they would acknowledge gradually that they have to deal with that law. That's going to take a while, probably, But if we can't, get it into the open, and I'm happy that I'm talking to you today, that it's going to be in the open more and more, then we continue like 6,000 years of disinformation and censorship, that are now, escalating in a society that I can't recognize as being certain.
Well, I mean, I guess what you're saying is that personal ethics really does have an impact on the information field around. My last podcast, which I've yet to release, it will have been released by this time. This one goes out. But in my last podcast, Aaron, I was talking to a doctor, and again, we were talking about the impact of ethics and how the medical profession's been removed from personal culpability through a sense of corporatism. So
Yes.
nobody's held responsible. And I guess in a sense, we're saying the same with politics. It's kind of like you're saying, I guess it's going to take a long time for individuals to change their way of thinking. So is there a way of that you can see of improving the system that it doesn't have to take such a long time, to get this more, individual sense of accountability and responsibility in the system?
Yeah, I know how what you're saying. It is so difficult to speak about that, to penetrate for example, the mainstream media, to have, hey, this is an idea, it's maybe would work, to avoid the continuation of what we did wrong for another 1,000 years, right? But it's very difficult. I speak to people who understand what I'm saying, and you are one of them, but one of the few of them. How can I make it simpler? It's by writing these stories in books. Hopefully people, because I include the theories that I'm working with you now today in these books. Hopefully that in a simple language that people can understand. Okay, we're using metaphors, for example, to say, hey, we can't go to the moon, as I said, without information. We cannot fly or drive a car without information, and so on. So how can we expect to build a society without information? A stable and certain and happy society. And therefore we need ethics, because without ethics we become vulnerable. Ethics is also information, I see it. You exclude ethics as information because you ought to do something in the right way to not harm anybody, and that you ignore that. So the information, it will be also an information deficit, a lack of information. Hence, again, entropy, disorder, uncertainty. So it comes down to decide, am I using all information? Am I allowed to ask all the questions? And then we have a simple system that is, steerable, manageable, by allowing all the time feedback, new information to be able to correct. So the information theory has been there for hundreds of years. Now the last 60, 70 years is becoming a way of how to manage, complex systems, like the world, like society, like a town, like a school, whatever. All comes down to the steering, management with information. I can't make it any simpler than this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's on a kind of a leadership level of how to put the right information into these units or these operating systems for them to function well. I guess in a sense, just breaking it down to like the kind of micro level of the individual, there is a responsibility for us all to kind of do something with our consciousness, which is to kind of elevate it, because otherwise we're going to be kind of kind of subjected to the whim of whichever agendas going on, and be triggered by that. So having some level of consciousness that says, I have accountability here, I have some sense of responsibility of how I direct my focus, my will, what I put out, needs to be a starting point as well, because it's not just about some leader up there doing something good. It's about collectively us all making decisions about
Yes.
how we operate as information energy ourselves.
Yeah, so it's a first level of awareness, and then the next level is knowledge, and then the second, third level is skill we use in the oil industry. Awareness, knowledge, and skill. One thing is really a important part of our research is that if you do not allow all the information, you will not have the energy to make it work, because energy is actually information. So everything we now build, design, that are dependent on lesser information rather than more information, cannot be achieved. So this is a real important part of the findings we do now.
It kind of reminds me that the world needs more alchemists in a way that can look at how to put all these elements together, and create from that. And these are lost arts, aren't they? The lost arts of alchemy or other ways of using energy.
Well, it is called, we have physics, we have now the physics basis for this. We have the biological basis for the criteria of living systems. And then, of course, metaphysics was never acknowledged as science. But I cannot escape now. Metaphysics is what we do with the physics, like how we implement that knowledge and so on. So the bridge between physics and metaphysics can, I believe, now be built and being demonstrated, which is beautiful. Because Aristotle in metaphysics, 2,500 years ago, he already said, what can we do after physics? What can we do with that? So the implementation of humans by their consciousness, by their senses, by their heart, by their minds, being aware, being knowledgeable, being creative, everything comes into play. Everything. So I, cautiously call it the theory of everything, but my PhD supervisor didn't like that at all. Anyway, but I think a theory of everything.
Well, it's the as above, so below principle, isn't it? It's kind of as above, so below principle.
Yeah, it's exactly. And funny that you're saying that, because Joe Dispenza, in other words, also implemented as above, so below. So it all comes down to already what we know in our hearts. We know this. We are built like this. We have this intrinsic knowledge already here. We just have forgotten it, or we try not to, remember it because we have interest.
Yeah, there's another dimensional level to this, because many of the kind of advanced metaphysicists today, whether they come from a spiritual tradition or sometimes a science tradition, are talking about our true natures as being galactic. So we're going back to our galactic nature, and because we've come, we are galactic in terms of where we come out of the cosmic soup. We're returning back to a unified field, which is harmonious in nature, which is operating on a much higher level, and looking to address imbalance on a metaphysical level. So and then once that imbalance has been dealt with there, then it kind of goes down to the lower densities of physical matter.
Yeah. So physical matter, what we are made of, are stars. And, the chemical elements that build us are from universal stars. Beautiful. So we are those stars. We can shine as a star, or go down as a whatever. So the potentiality, the probability of performance is not been used yet as we can. And some philosophers knew this already. For example, I remember now the Hermetic philosophy 3,000 years ago. The Asclepius, he says, man, the greatest wonder. And 3,000 years ago, they were already saying this, but very few acknowledged it. But when we see the creations we have done, we have created, this computer. This is amazing, isn't it? So the potentiality of our brain capacity is unused, half unused, or maybe less even. So we can evolve, we can create novelty because we are that universe, really.
And some people say that we're on the kind of the cusp of that paradigm shift in terms of how we are operating, that we're going to be more activated, and future generations are going to be displaying qualities and characteristics that are really going to be part of this new world of innovative technology, of resourcefulness that's going to benefit the whole. I mean, that seems to be, and that kind of contradicts in a way, which is like where you said that the future is more uncertain than ever, because it sounds like that people are moving more towards a certainty that things can go in the right direction.
Yeah, well, certainty or uncertainty in the right direction. We have to use the energy to be creative, not being destructive. That is the first part one. So we have the energy, we have it, we all possess it. Now it's then the time to become aware of this. It's called realiteit, the limitations of reality. We have to stay within those in order to survive. Now, many things we built, created, are contradicting that. So the basis for certainty decreases. Also in natural systems, for example, the habitat, the environment, and so on is not really supporting that anymore too much, and less, and maybe that accelerates this disorder entropy. But now, because we're working on this, and not only me, but many people, of course, have similar thoughts, why not combine these thoughts and then, offer this insight?
It's almost like, something in the nature of human beings. We have to be taken to the precipice, look over, like, this, if we continue this way, this is the result, to kind of pull back and perhaps decommission some of those, that bad science that's been happening for so long.
Yeah, in my book, I write, for example, this, there's a dialogue in the book and said, why is it us that have to do this? And then I say, I mean, the protagonist says, because we've been chosen by the universe. Why is it me that talks about this? Why is that? Why did I not, say, okay, shut up and do my thing and that's all? And why is it you, Amina, who wants to think about these things? But I think that universe is like providence, right? There's a providence also. My mother always said, we have to believe in providence.
Yeah, well, I believe that we actually chose it on a soul level. We chose it. Our higher contracts. We chose these roles.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh no, I was just finishing there. So whatever we do, mankind, we have the ability to be creative and always thought survival, the teleological goal, the goal-seeking idea is to survive and evolve, just like nature does. Now, when we put ourselves in line with that, we'll be fine. It's just now a moment we need to choose to do that, all of us. And if not, then we have a disorderly future, and I would not be happy with that, because we have the future of the children to think about. Anyway, so we do this for the next generation. Maybe our lives will be okay still, but the next generation, if they do not change course, it will be more entropic, disorderly for a long time to come.
So, and I know, Aaron, you're very aware of how these, like the green agenda, can be manipulated, so people feel this existential threat, they feel guilt, they're going to limit the amount of control they have in their lives and give that over to a more autocratic power to take responsibility for it all. but we're not actually saying that, are we? We're saying, that by co-creating really good solutions, taking ultimate responsibility, and seeing that rebalancing what's being put out in the field is the ultimate solution, rather than playing into the climate kind of change kind of narrative, which is very hijacked these days. I think
well, the sciences are now only allowed by us when they serve a political agenda. That's the problem now. So the science of climate change and so on is again like half of the information is allowed, while the other half of information is forbidden, is censored. Of course, so the climate agenda on its own can't ever be achieved because again the information deficit occurs. So that the idea of the politicized science allowed and the non-politicized science forbidden, that brings us to a very, very awkward time in our global world and our society. That cannot be sustained. Self-maintenance, self-sustaining is cognition, is for processing of all information. That message, and it's so simple now because we have now a one rule, one line solution, really, use all information. I cannot make it any simpler than this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we were just to kind of distill it down to one kind of image, you would see a bird sitting on a phone line without a problem, but you would never see a bird on a 5G tower because they just know that these kind of things are harmful. And so it's like using that information, opening our eyes to say, well, how do we interpret this information? So, it's not destructive.
No, exactly. So
for all life.
And so it's one line that applies to everything. I mean, we can create better design, we can create better products, we can design better healthcare, as long as all the information is there. A hospital that only allows medicine, not spiritual, guidance or healing or meditation, right? Is also using not everything available to heal the person. So when that's not allowed, because the science says we can't allow it, it's non-science, it is whatever. But it is again all we observe, really. We need to use everything. We've been given these senses, our observation, our skills, our feelings and sensations to use towards survival. An animal does the same.
I think I've heard that, scientists will be the new priests, because of the role that scientists play, but certainly in terms of bringing good science forward and as you say, bringing the bridge between science and spirituality in the field of metaphysics is definitely where some of these resolutions can happen. But we've kind of talked for quite a while. I'm just wondering whether you want to talk about your new book being released today called The Brussels Lobby. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that will be hopefully January. It will come out now. It's a bit delayed. Anyway, January. No, The Brussels Lobby is about two engineers in France. They discover a new sustainable non-pollutant energy source. But of course, the people in Brussels, the lobbyists and the Commissioner for Climate Action and Change, does not really like that solution, because there is vested interests in the sustenance of, for example, all these crazy climate goals we have. The wind, the farm, the oil, everything. So these two engineers are then being threatened to be destroyed, and the Brussels think tank called Sustenance for All, like my own think tank, of course, intervenes and helps those engineers by protecting them so they can market that new energy source. So it's based upon fusion technology, nuclear fusion, like creating a solar sun on Earth, because as you know, the sun produces 600 times the energy need per day for the world. So if we can just, harvest a little bit of that power, the solar helium conversion, we can energize the world forever. That idea, based upon the sciences, because again, the information theory is also used in that book. In order to make it succeed, we need all information, right? And that is a thriller, an echo thriller again. It's an exciting book about a sustenance for all think tank fighting big business, big lobby in the European Communion in Brussels.
It sounds really good. It sounds exciting and meaningful. It's interesting what you're saying about using the power of the sun to basically generate energy in the world, on Earth. And I guess the ancients had lots of energy grids, didn't they, that became deactivated. Some say the pyramids were those. But there's certainly stones, megalithic stones all around the world that have, when scientists have gone in and measured them, have realized that they're harnessing energy and that they could, actually power up, the whole of the US, for example.
Yes, it is theoretically possible because, that nuclear system they called ITER, International Thermonuclear Reactors, being built in the south of France. So it is there already. They can probably do it. Theoretically, they can. So they're building it now. But it takes a long time. So the idea of these two engineers, they succeed in their barn, to do it. So, it's possible anytime now.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm a big believer that a lot of technology has been suppressed, and that, once this suppression kind of lifts, people are just going to have access to so much, including free energy.
We are really, what we're now doing is disturbing and halting the human creativity, which is terrible.
Yeah. So it's the few that are doing that to the 99%, isn't it? It's the 1% doing it to the 99% ultimately. So Aaron, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I think I want you to kind of share where people can find more about your work. And which website are you using now?
Well, I just use, you can put it on this video later on, Sustenance for All. This is my think tank. I'm already happy that more thinkers have joined me, or other thinkers. They believe in the concept, and they also contribute a lot, making my work easier. So they say, hey, think about this, So we share. And also the recognition by Dr. Melvin Vobson. I'm going to interview him in December in England, in Portsmouth, which is of course very important for my own research, for my PhD paper that I'm trying to write. Some other, interesting people I've been contacting, and they like what I do. So I'm talking to them as well to complete my research, hopefully by the end of the year. And then I write my dissertation. And then hopefully, the university would accept a non-academic like me, just a pragmatic guy, from Holland.
Wow, I mean, I think education needs more common sense people, and
Yes.
less people with vested interests, and certainly so more people who are prepared to kind of think outside of the box, if I can use that cliche. So Aaron, thank you so much again for coming today, sharing your insights, giving us an update on your work, which is always fascinating. It's such a shame that like you say, so few people get it, but essentially it's about how really bringing ethics into physics is so integral to, shaping the way energy works and, the world that we live in. It's also been really useful to talk about the false information of the green agenda, because I think that's something that many people see but can't quite articulate how, taxpayers' money is supporting, a political system that just, will not work and is ultimately destructive to humans, animals, and bird life, and all the planet that we all love. So really good to open that conversation up in a space where we can't be called climate deniers. Do you want to say something else?
Okay, yeah, the last one I almost forgot, but I thought about this. We should not talk about sustainability anymore, but we have to ask the question: can what we build, create, be and stay functional without doing harm? I think that's a change.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely, because sustainability just means more of the same, but couched in a way that you can keep it going longer.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree with you on that one. So thank you, Aaron. Thank you for coming today. And thank you for everyone listening. I'll be posting this on my Spotify podcast account, Free Thinkers Hub, Amina Ahmed. And we'll talk again, Aaron, another time, I'm sure.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for letting me blubber about. Thank you.
Always interesting to listen. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.